All right, we're going to go ahead and get underway. Tonight's speaker is Nancy Potts, along with her sweet baboo Bob, who are also volunteers here. She's going to be telling us about some of the unknown people or lesser known people who were really pioneers in aviation in the beginning days. And then after that, she'll be available to answer your questions. I'll have a few announcements, and then you'll be on your way. Nancy?
Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. I'm not quite sure where to begin. I have had an interest in aviation most of my life, okay, because number one, my dad was in World War II, and we had a photo of him and his crew and his plane, and I just thought it was, really interesting and stuff. And so, and he was stationed over in North Africa and Italy. And when I was about 7, he decided, well, I needed to buy, a set of encyclopedias for the kids so they can, learn some more stuff. And that's when I learned about aerodynamics and people like Claire Chenault, Jimmy Doolittle, the Wright brothers, and all kinds of airplanes. And not only that, but then I started building my own little model airplanes, which is kind of silly for a 7-year-old girl, but I did it anyway. And I was really impressed with all these people. But it wasn't until I went to work for the National Aviation Hall of Fame that I realized there's more to aviation than just these particular people who made all the headlines, okay? So I'm here to talk to you about some of these other people that are just as important to aviation, but people don't know that much about. Okay? So, we all know about Wilbur and Orville Wright, right? They flew the first airplane. The problem is, who made that airplane fly? Does anybody know?
Charlie Taylor. The engine guy.
I jumped the gun, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, Charles was born in Illinois about 1868, all right? And his family lived on a farm, but he decided he doesn't want to be a farmer, so he decided he was going to be a machinist. And he also ended up being not just a machinist, but an inventor and mechanic. And when he got married, about 1892, he and his family moved to Dayton because his wife's father, or uncle, owned some buildings here, and one of those buildings happened to be the Wright brothers' bicycle shop. And so then he went to work for the Wright brothers, and the Wright brothers, they were doing a great job, building all these, airplanes, only they didn't have any engines to them, and they really needed an engine. So Charlie, he says, okay, I think maybe I might be able to figure it out, before they ever asked him. So he had made a plan about, but he didn't write it all down like in a blueprint or anything. He just put it on a napkin, okay, and said, okay, this is what it's going to look like. And so when they finally said to him, do you think you could build us, an engine? Because they said, we can't find anybody else to do it, and automobile engines are too heavy. And he says, yeah, not a problem. So he decided, okay, I will do it. He says, I just need an aluminum block. So they got him the block, and he just used a drill, okay, and a lathe and hand tools, and he managed to build them an engine within 6 weeks. I mean, that's pretty amazing, don't you think? 6 weeks.
By hand.
And then they took it down to Kitty Hawk, and they were able to put it on the airplane, and they were able to fly it. So the next few years, he went ahead and he helped them do different kinds of airplanes. And then, about 1908, they decided they were going to build a military airplane for, because, military needed aviation flyers. And so he went with Orville down to Fort Myers in Virginia. And he was supposed to be on the plane when Orville took it up. But instead, this guy says, no, you need to put, Sergeant or Lieutenant Thomas Sheffield on it instead. Selfridge, sorry. Okay, so, which was a good thing for Charles because that plane crashed. And it killed Selfridge, and it injured Orville pretty badly, but he was still okay. But the problem wasn't the engine that failed. The propeller got tangled up in one of the guide lines, and that's what caused it to fail, do that. But in spite of all of this, Taylor still wanted to be a pilot. Wright brothers said, we'll take you up, we'll let you fly, but there's no way we're going to let you be a pilot, because they needed him to do all the maintenance work for the things that they were building. So, and they were afraid, okay, you're going to leave if we, let you be a pilot. But he did leave for a little while. I don't know if you guys know about Cal Rogers. He was the first person to fly from the East Coast to the West Coast, and he did that in 1911. And he asked Charles to be his chief mechanic on this flight, which was a good thing, okay, because Rogers was a terrible, terrible pilot. He kept, crashing that plane, just boom. But, he did manage to make it to, to California. And Charles stayed there for a little while, but then he came back here to Dayton, and he was the chief mechanic for the Wright Company until about 1920. And then he decided he was going to move to California, and that's where he stayed, okay, until about 1937, when Henry Ford said, I want to build a museum up here in Deerfield, okay, or Dearborn, Michigan. And so he said, Taylor, I want you to come and help me, because I've got the bicycle shop that belonged to the Wright brothers, but I need all the tools and things that they had in it to put on display. So he went there and he helped them do that. And then he moved back to California. And Taylor, well, he died in 1956 in California. He was about 88 years old when he died. And but one thing people don't understand is he was very instrumental in creating a special profession, and that is important to aviation, and that's aircraft mechanics. We really need those, and they're essential for aircraft safety, from manufacturing them, okay, to the daily maintenance of them. And and Charles was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1965. He also the FAA has an award given to mechanics, and it's the Charles Taylor Master Mechanic Award. And it's for elder mechanics who have been, doing that job for a long time. And Embry-Riddle has the Charles Taylor Aviation Maintenance Science Department at their university. So he was, a lesser known, pioneer in aviation, but he was really important because people hadn't done what he did before. There wasn't anybody to do that. Okay? So, next person on my list.
I'm a little behind.
You're a little behind. Okay. Charles McGee. All right.
She didn't tell me how many pictures.
There's only 3 for each one.
Oh.
Okay. All right. Before January 2021, most people probably do not know about Charles McGee. In December of 2020, President Trump okay, promoted him to brigadier general and pinned his gold star on his uniform. What?
So,
Oh, silver star?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's a silver star. Okay. In 2011, I got to meet Mickey when he was inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame. I did the research and I helped write the induction script for him. He was a really great guy. I really, really liked him. And he sort of had, you know, this motto that that the target, to target the positive and put hard times behind, focus on now. He also said, do while you can. Now, McGee was born in Cleveland, Ohio on December the 7th, 1919. All right? Imagine that. Okay, his father was a minister, but he also worked as a teacher and a social worker, so they moved around a lot. And when they were living in Chicago, he and his brother Lewis joined the Boy Scouts, where Charles ended up earning his Eagle Scout Award. And Boy Scouting was very important to him, okay, and the values of Boy Scouting were with him, were the cornerstone of his life forever. And about 1939, he decided, well, he was going to go to college. So he went to the University of Illinois, and there he joined the ROTC and the Persian Rifles. And he also had to work to earn money to go to college, so he worked at, you know, this steel mill over there. But then while he was at the college, he learned that over at Chanute Field, they were testing people to be pilots. And he thought, okay, I think I'm going to try to see if I can't pass the test. And he did. Okay? So that was about, 1941 or so, right when the war started. And in 42, he didn't go back to college. Instead, he continued working at a steel mill. And he got married, and he joined the Air Corps, and he was sent to Tuskegee, Alabama, and he learned how to fly. And he graduated flight school in 1943 as a second lieutenant. Now, in early 44, he was a fighter pilot with the Tuskegee Airmen, and he was with the 332nd Fighter Group, and they were stationed in the Mediterranean. And in about May of 44, the unit was transferred from the 12th Army Air Force to the 15th. And before that, him and his group, they were just patrolling Naples Harbor and the Isle of Capri. But when they got transferred, okay, they started escorting bombers, okay, and not doing that patrol work. And so he says, finally, we're doing what we were sent here to do. During that time, he flew 82 tactical missions and 54 combat missions, and he was promoted to captain. He received credit, okay, for an aerial victory when he shot down an FW-190, okay, and he received 12 air medals, which is quite an accomplishment for, somebody. But this was just the beginning of his military career, because he really enjoyed flying, so he decided to stay with the Air Force, after the war. So he and his family, of course, were stationed different places during the States. But then in May of 1950, he got orders for the Philippines at Clark Field. He was supposed to be like the base operations officer and with the 37th Fighter Bomber Group Squadron. But the family didn't get a chance to join him. You know why? The Korean War. So because when the Korean War started, we were involved. We were part of the United Nations, and they needed pilots to fly the P-51s and the F-51s. So McKee was placed on flight status. So by July, he was sent to Japan to fly combat missions. But then he realized these missions weren't like the ones in World War II, because with those missions, those were just escort missions. These missions, and you only did like maybe one a day. Here, you were doing 2 or 3 times a day, going out. So during July of 2029 to February 20th, he flew 100 missions and was promoted to major. Okay, he received the Distinguished Flying Cross and several more air medals. When the war ended, he returned to the Philippines, and his family got to join him finally. He was command of the 44th Fighter Bomber Squadron, and they transitioned, okay, to the F-80 jet fighters. And the family got to return to the United States in May of '53. So over the next few years, he traveled to various bases, in the States and overseas. Sometimes the family came along, sometimes they didn't. And in '59, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given a regular commission in the Air Force. Then, Vietnam War came along. In 1967, he received orders to go to Vietnam and was flying in another war. That's his 3rd war. He was commanding the 16th Tactical Reconnaissance Squadron near Tan Son Nhut, which is near Saigon. And he was there for a year, and he flew 173 missions. When the Tet Offensive began, okay, he was one of 6 pilots on the base because all the other pilots were living off base at the time, and they couldn't get back. So these 6 guys were there, and they flew all of the squadron's back-to-back missions for 3 days. He received the Legion of Merit and the Distinguished Flying Cross and several more air medals. In 1968, he was sent back to Europe as the 7th Army Headquarters, Germany, and promoted to colonel in '69. He retired in '63, okay, and he had served in 3 wars, and he had completed 409 aerial combat missions, which is a record. Nobody else has done that since. Okay, and he died in January of 2022. He was over 100 years old. What? I think that's amazing that he lived that long. Okay, and he was still allowed to do some flying when he was like 100. They let him fly a plane.
I wasn't there.
Okay, all right, okay. I'm going to think that most people don't know about Gary Cobb. And she was another person that was inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame in 2012. And again, I got to do the research and help write the instrument script. She was a really amazing and determined lady. She was born, okay, in 1931 in Norman, Oklahoma. At age 6, she kind of fell in love with the outdoors. During World War II, her dad was with the Air Corps, and they were stationed at Shepherd Field in Wichita Falls, Texas. Her dad decided he was going to buy a 1936 Waco, and she was there to help restore it because she just thought that was really great. Okay, she just thought that was great. And after they got it all restored, her dad said, "I'm going to let you come and take a ride." Okay, not a problem. So he put some cushions on the back seat and put some wooden blocks on the pedals, and they went up. And when they reached about 1,000 feet, he says, "Go ahead, you can take over the controls." And she's going, "Whoa!" I mean, she was 12 years old, okay? Like, he's letting me fly? Really? So, but she longed for freedom, okay? And here she was. She found it at the age of 12 in the back seat of this Waco, okay? After the war, the family moved to Oklahoma City, and she earned her private pilot's license when she was in high school. By the time she was 18, she had a commercial pilot's license. She was a certified ground instructor with ratings in civil air regulations, navigation, meteorology, airframe, and engines. She loved to go out to different airports and help with maintenance and cleaning airplanes, and she did that, you know, forever. She just really enjoyed doing that when she was a kid. Okay? And she wanted to buy her own airplane and earn a living flying planes. So she worked, and she bought a World War II Fairchild PT-23, and she named it Paradise Lost. The next few years, she worked jobs that let her fly, do it like crop dusting and flight and ground instructing. Finally, she thought, well, I'd like to do something more. And she found an advertisement they were looking for a co-pilot to fly DC-3s down in Miami, Florida. So she applied. Problem was, she didn't tell them that she was a woman. All right? So they said they accepted her application, but when she got there for the interview, they said, "Oh, you're a woman? No, I'm sorry. We can't let you be a co-pilot." All right, but she didn't have any money to go back home. I mean, she had driven herself there, and she had no money to get back home. So she found some work there at the airport, and she finally got a job with Fleetway Incorporated, delivering aircraft all over the world. And she did this like for 3 years. Then about 1955, she decided she would like to go back to Oklahoma City. And she continued to fly for a few more years, and she set 4 world records for speed, distance, and altitude. By 1959, she received a lot of awards, like the National Pilots Association Pilot of the Year and Women's National Aeronautic Association's Women of the Year in Aviation. Then, in '59, she was selected to complete the Mercury astronaut tests. All right, now I think we all know about the Mercury 7, right? But how many of you know about the Mercury 13? Okay. Dr. Lovelace was testing the men for astronaut, okay, the astronauts. But he thought, well, why not test the women too? Might as well test them both. But he didn't tell NASA he was doing that, okay? It was a secret. He didn't let them know. And she was the only woman out of the 13 who completed all 3 phases of the program. Because when NASA found out, and the government, they said, we're shutting it down. The women can't finish, they can't do it anymore. But Jerry, out of all the people that were tested, including the men, they did the same test for both men and women, she was in the top 2%.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, can you believe that? Top 2%?
Yeah.
Okay. It would be another 20 years before women in the United States would be allowed to go into space. Congress and John Glenn were kind of instrumental in keeping women from going into space. Okay? John Glenn said, you know, women were to stay at home and take care of the house and the kids. Okay? In fact, what he said was, it's just a fact. The men go off and fight the wars and fly the airplanes. That women are not in this field is just a fact of our social order. Okay? Well, you know, she really was kind of disappointed because she really wanted to go into space. But then she thought, well, I like flying, so I might as well put my piloting skills to use right here on Earth. So she decided she was going to become a missionary pilot to the primitive indigenous people in the Amazon jungle. She flew new air routes and across the Andes Mountains, and she drew the maps herself. And she covered jungles of the Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil, sorry, Peru, and Ecuador. For 48 years, she worked with missionaries and doctors, bringing medicine, food, seeds, clothing, and all the necessities to these people. Okay? In 1973, she was awarded the Harmon Trophy as the top woman pilot in the world. And in '81, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize for humanitarian work in the Amazon jungle. During this time, there were a lot of South American, governments that honored her for her work. We know she didn't really realize her dream to fly into space, but she did pave the way for the other U.S. women to go ahead and become astronauts. She died in 2019. All right, now, I have written 11 books, but Taylor, McGee, and Cobb are the only aviation biographies that I have written, okay? But I am working on a few more. One of them is Sir Frank Whittle. Now, he's an Englishman, okay? But he invented the first gas turbine jet engine, and he was only 22 when he did that. He sent the plans to the Air Ministry over there, who thought it was impractical, okay? But he patented the idea anyway, all right? But he didn't have money when it came time to renew the patent, so he couldn't renew it. And the RAF, they didn't think that it really needed to be classified. But the Germans did, okay? They saw its potential, and they used that information to develop the world's first jet fighter in World War II. Okay, and I'm working on another book. That's Whittle, yeah.
Right out behind, listening.
Okay.
Sir.
No, that's not Sir. It's Cromwell Dixon.
Scratch the sir.
Yeah. Okay. A kid named Cromwell Dixon. Okay. He was 12, and when he built a small roller coaster in his backyard up in Columbus, Ohio. Okay. And he would charge the kids in the neighborhood a penny to come and ride it. He also built a mechanical fish and a 4-seat boat and a box camera. He built box cameras, and he sold them to the neighborhood stores in Columbus, and they could sell them, okay? I haven't found any photographs of any of these, but I do know that, he did this. All right, then, at the age of 14, he designed and built a dirigible, okay? And in 1907, he flew it all over Columbus, and he was invited to the St. Louis exhibition. Yeah, okay, and he was the first person to fly across the Mississippi River in his dirigible, okay? He spent the next few years flying at parks and county fairs in the United States. Then, in 1911, he decided he was going to trade in his dirigible for an airplane. He was the youngest person to have a pilot's license at the age of 19. And in September that year, he was with the first to fly across the Continental Divide from Helena, Montana to Blossburg, Montana. The problem is, 2 days later, he was in Spokane, Washington, flying at a fair, and his plane crashed and he died. So he was only 19. Okay? And we think that probably the reason he didn't get as much notoriety about it is because he died, okay, so close after he did that, and because he was flying a Curtiss plane and not a Wright plane. So, all right, that's the end of my speech. I hope I didn't bore you too much. So, are there any questions about anything? So, anyway, my books are for sale over here. Half the proceeds go to the museum. Okay.
And she will autograph them.
Oh, yes, I will.
$100. Let me point this out to him.
What?
That is the one he built.
Yes.
That is,
How did he power it?
it was like a bicycle wheel, you know, it was,
So he pedaled.
he pedaled.
Well, he spun the propeller.
Yeah, he spun the propeller in the back with like a bicycle, okay? And
And
the
then
balloon was made out of silk.
the handlebars worked the rudder,
Yeah, the rudder.
and that's how he turned it.
Oh, brilliant.
Hmm?
Brilliant.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Must've been a good seamstress, sew all that up.
Oh, boy.
His mother, telling about his mother.
Well, his mother and his sister, who was like a year younger than him, they went ahead and they sewed the balloon, all right, okay, and for him. So, yeah, he did that. They did that, and yes, they also shellacked it so that it wouldn't, so that the air would stay in.
Is that hydrogen or helium?
I have no idea.
From what we understand, he had an arrangement with the Columbus Gas Company.
Well-
So it's maybe natural gas. We don't know what kind of gas they were generating at that time.
Well, I also read, okay, that he built his own device to
Generate the gas.
to create the gas.
He was
And
peddling a bomb around it.
Smoking, not good longevity.
okay, so anyhow,
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
okay, you're good.
You made it.
Oh, she's not done yet.
I'm not.
So we want to give you a certificate of appreciation. Excuse me. Is it okay if I interrupt you?
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you.
Be quick.
So we're really thrilled that you guys are volunteers here. Particularly busy as a beaver Bob, hanging things up and putting things back together again. But we want to give you the certificate of appreciation to all who shall see these presents. Greetings. This certificate is awarded to Nancy Potts in recognition of her support to our programs and for her continued dedication, commitment, and support to the ideals of patriotism this 13th day of September in the year 2023. So take that with our
You want to leave
thanks.
that open, Mark, so we can get a picture, please, sir?
Or we can do that. I don't think she does this.
Shake, take, salute.
Right, you're gonna have to step out from behind your protective wall there.
There you go. Big smile.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we always try to give a lovely parting gift to our, and Kathy picked this out. So
Oh,
we get a lot of things through here that we think we should probably hold on to that because we may need that one day.
uh-huh.
And as luck would have it, this large plaque of the original contract and specifications for the first military aircraft
Oh,
we thought would be appropriate since you were talking about the first pioneers of flight.
well, thank you.
So when you complain about how heavy it is, this is Kathy's idea.
Thank you all for being here and listening to me.
Right, as usual, we're thankful for you coming out tonight.
You.
I was telling Nancy that, we had a full house, and we think it's because this is the first Wednesday evening where there's not been a thunderstorm watch, an ice warning, or a tornado alarm. So our next speaker coming up later in the month, we'll see how he does and what kind of weather event we'll have for that.
What is that?
It should be on the back of your program. Is it 27th, I think? And note, we're not going to have a speaker for October. We we should have one for November, and then we're looking for another military chaplain to come speak in December, because the one that we had is now TDY to a classified location, so he's oddly enough unavailable. As always, we depend on your support, whether it's with artifacts, whether it's with hard cash, or with the people that you know. So support us in some way, even if it's just telling your next door neighbor that they need to come visit us, because our success is tied to you. So our success is your success. All right, any questions? All right, well, thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
The books are $10, they're there on the table, and she said,